The summer after my high school graduation, I left to go to college and start out on my own life path. I had very little money and even less knowledge of how to handle my personal finances. Sure, in high school, I had jobs, I had a paper out for years, and I babysat, but the money I made was spent fairly quickly. In college, I worked to put myself through school, and I was very proud of that fact, but I was also overwhelmed by the burden of it. I began to worry that the semester would come that I wouldn't be able to pay all my bills, and I developed an almost fear of spending money. I felt guilty about every dime I spent on anything that wasn't a necessity. And if a friend called to ask me to go to the movies or maybe go out to lunch, more than often I declined because I was worried that if I did, I wouldn't have the money to pay for things like rent. And this mindset, looking back, really caused me to miss a lot of wonderful opportunities in my life. But it was a mindset that stayed with me for many years, well after my college experience. And it wasn't until I'd been married that I finally found a tool that helped me to break free from these mental spending shackles. And the tool that I found for me was budgeting. Budgeting opened a whole new mindset that really liberated me. It eased my worries and gave me permission to spend my money. In short, budgeting granted me financial freedom, and I know it can do the same for you. Now, I'm sure that not everyone has had the same fear of spending that I had. However, worrying about money is something that most of us can relate to. In fact, according to research, half of you lost sleep last night worrying over your finances. And this is not surprising when you consider some of these statistics. 59% of adults in the US live paycheck to paycheck. 29% of US adults don't put any income into their savings. And 40% of adults have less than $300 in savings. This means that any type of emergency costing over $300 requires that person to either sell something or borrow money to cover the expense. And with the availability of credit, borrowing is usually the easiest solution. And we can see that holds true by the next statistics. The average US adult has $6,000 in credit card debt. And when you pair that $6,000 of credit card debt with other debt like student loans and car payments, it's easy to see how the average US household non-mortgage debt is estimated to be $65,000. Now, this is the situation my husband and I found ourselves in. We weren't $65,000 in debt, but we were after a few years of marriage in debt. When we had our first child, we decided I would stay home and be a full-time mom. And we were excited for this change, but not prepared for it. We didn't realize how tight our budget would be under one income. And after a few years, some emergency room visits and the birth of our second child, we were thousands of dollars in debt. Proverbs 22:7 says that the borrower is a servant to the lender, and I felt like a servant to all of our debts. We were literally living my worst nightmare, and all those fears of not being able to pay our bills were coming true. And it was overwhelming. And that was the moment that I realized that I needed to find a better solution and a way to manage my money. Budgeting allowed me to take control over my money instead of letting my money control me. So today, I want to show you how you too can find financial freedom through creating and maintaining a budget. Now, one of the biggest problems is that creating a budget can feel very daunting at first. I know it was for us. But luckily, it's easier than most people think, especially nowadays when there are so many tools to help us. So one of the very first steps that we need to do is just to start by tracking our expenses. There are a number of great free programs that can help with this. Here is a few of them, and a quick online search will show you so many more. My husband and I have tried many of these, and they are all great. And what they all have in common is it helps you to pick the different areas and categorize the areas that you spend money and helps you track those expenses. So today, I'm actually going to show you how my husband and I do it, which is on a simple Google spreadsheet. Now, that's just the template we use. For some of you starting out, you may find that some programs more like this are easier when you're just starting. So I'm now going to show you an example of the budget that we use. So we really liked using the Google spreadsheet, and that's what you see here because it allowed us to customize it the way we want. At the top, we always put our income, whatever money we feel like we're going to have coming in. And then our expenses are put into different categories before we need to spend our money. Now, we have a budget here that we'll come back to in a minute, but our weekly expense tracking is really where you want to start. We put any expense we made over the month into this spreadsheet. What bills we paid at the start of the month go in here, and then money as we begin to spend it goes in here. So for instance, if I decided to go and get a haircut at the end of the month, I would come in here and I would put that into my budget. And as you can see, we have a program that this budget that says the column that says actual adds up all the expenses. So throughout the month, we can see where we are. And at the end of the month, it tallies it all up for us so we can see what we've done. And that way we get an accurate account of how much we've spent. So one of the problems is many people go and they want to set a budget, but they don't know what money to use. So it's easy when you're looking at your mortgage to know how much to budget for, but what about more of your discretionary spending like food and clothing or entertainment? So 65% of Americans couldn't tell you how much money they spent last month. And if you don't know how much you spent last month, how would you know what to budget? Tracking your expenses over a few months will give you an amount that you can average, and you can take those averages and they become the baseline for your budget. And that's what you put here, the average that you get after tracking over several months. And so tracking your expenses, once you've done that, lets you to start to see what your spending habits are. So it highlights some of your good spending habits and as well as some of your bad spending habits. For example, my husband and I, after tracking for a while, noticed that my husband was spending a lot of money going to 7-Eleven. It was a thing he liked to do every day after work. 7-Eleven was right across the street from his work. And so he would go walk over there, buy a soda, another little snack, give himself a break. But we noticed that he was spending those little expenses were adding up to more than he thought. He was spending more than he wanted. And so we decided he wasn't ready to give up this habit, but we came to an amount that we were both willing or happy with. And that's why we put him into the budget. And that's where you get Brian's food. We came up with an amount we could both have, or we were both okay with. And that gave him permission to spend that much money. That leads to the second thing about tracking your expenses. It allows you to prioritize things in your life. So there's things that we know are set every month, as we said before, but with your discretionary money, you have a lot of freedom of where you put it. So as you plan these categories, you can decide what things are important to your family. For instance, we love to go on vacation, and often we will prioritize vacations over other expenses like our entertainment or going out to eat because we want to have money at the end of the month. Setting a budget allows you to do that. And it's something we could never accomplish before we set a budget because we spent money on other things. And by the time we wanted to go on vacation, there was no money there. So once you've set a budget, you need to maintain it. Once you have those averages, you can go and every month set the budget. My husband and I do this through a monthly date night. And some of you may not think it sounds very fun to discuss money over a date night, but for my husband and I, it is wonderful. It is my favorite date night of the month. We start by reviewing our expenses. We see how much we've spent, and then we set our budget. We set our budget over here, and it allows us to prioritize where we want our money to go. And this is where you get to see how you can make your goals and dreams come true by managing your money. You get to decide where that goes. We practice a $0 based budget, meaning we account for every one of our dollars. And for us, this works really well. Don't lose another night's sleep over worrying about your money. My husband and I have been debt-free outside of our mortgage for the last 7 years. And the peace of mind that that brings to me has been worth all the amount of time and energy we've spent into putting our budget together. take advantage of some of the tools I've showed you today and go home and start your own budget. Budgeting has brought me financial freedom and peace of mind, and I know it can do the same for you. Thank you.